The third most significant intangible asset risk that companies face is around hazardous use of open source code software. Today, 80% of all software code is open source. That is, software that was written by one individual, but that is freely, or not so freely, available for use by other individuals. Open source code has major advantages, and many companies would struggle to develop software successfully without it. However, it also presents three very significant risks. First, it can be very difficult to prove who actually owns the software. If 80% of your code base is written by people outside your company, do you really own it? This becomes particularly relevant when you try to exit the business or are looking to sell a particular piece of software. Number two, the license terms of open source code software can be poisonous to proprietary code developed by your company. That is, those license terms can attach to your software and effectively convert your proprietary code into open source code, so that it has to be distributed, typically for free or on the same terms as the open source code. Generally, private companies don't want their private software code they have invested millions of dollars in developing having to be given away for free. The third issue is that open source code is a very effective way of getting malicious code inside a proprietary source code base. In a recent example, we were working with a private equity firm. They were investing a large sum of money into an industrial company. When we analysed the company, we realised that the company's most critical asset was actually its software code. We asked if the investor had completed an open source code audit prior to acquisition, given that this asset, the software, was crucial to the company's operations. The investor asked what an open source code audit actually was. When we conducted the open source code audit, we discovered that the code base was riddled through with open source code software that would require a complete rewrite of the code. This is the equivalent of buying a building without doing any kind of due diligence on the structure and integrity of the building, or even if it is up to code. The result in this situation was that the private equity investor had committed over $100 million to a company whose primary asset was highly questionable and exposed themselves to material additional risk and cost. To prevent this, the solution is to understand when you're using open source code software at all. Many of the senior management teams of the companies we deal with are not even aware that their software developers are actually utilizing open source code. So the first step is to understand, are you using open source code software at all? And expect the answer to this question to be yes. We work with a major open source code firm out of the United States, and in 10 years and 13,000 audits, it has found open source code software 100% of the time. Once you know whether or not you're utilizing open source code software, the next step is to understand whether or not the license terms present an issue with your proprietary software code, and whether or not there are also any security threats as a consequence of the use of that open source code software. Finally, you need to ensure that you can establish chain of title to the proprietary code you have developed for your own purposes.